Hey guys, it is Marcus and Terry with you today, and today we have a kind of a deep, dark topic where we're going to be talking about healing the nervous system from trauma and dealing with trauma and addiction. Now, this is something that I've dealt with quite a bit throughout my sobriety and even before my sobriety. I come from a pretty interesting background where there was some abuse and some, massive, or not massive, but pretty strenuous bullying and all kinds of things in my life. And it's interesting because sometimes we try to ignore those things, even if we've been sober for a while, and they can come up in our life. And the interesting thing about trauma is it stores itself in your body, and there's usually a response to a certain stimulus. It's kind of like, you've been programmed to act a certain way when a certain thing happens, or you've been programmed to be afraid of things. And I remember years ago when I used to be a magician, I did a magic show at a local kids party, and it's a show that I had done hundreds of times before this, and I had like a giant spider as part of a prop. It was like a funny gag, and all the kids, thousands of kids had seen that show and they've seen that trick, and no one really cared until one day I was at this house doing a birthday show, and this kid just freaked out. I mean, freaked out, insanely freaked out. Stop the show, take a break, regroup, see what's going on. And it's interesting because that child had no ability to control the response to the stimulus of the spider. For whatever reason, they had the arachnophobia, whether they were bit by a spider or heard about a spider or watched a movie about a spider or whatever it was, made that response. Now, that's a drastic example, and we know there's lots of people in the world that are afraid of spiders. But what about people like you, me, and Terry, who maybe we have a fear of something irrational? I've learned recently that one of my fears, I mean, I kind of knew it was there all along, but I learned about one of my fears, and it's kind of irrational. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times these traumas don't make any sense to us, and we don't know what to do about them. It's kind of like, hey, automatically it produces a fight, flight, or freeze response in our body, and we don't know what to do about it. And it's very interesting because this is one of the things that I'm sure contributed to my alcoholism. It contributed to my drinking because I didn't know what was going on. At that point, I had always said to myself, Marcus, something is wrong with you. And I'd tell everyone who would listen, hey, something's wrong with me. I don't know what's going on. And the fact of the matter is there's nothing wrong with me and there's nothing wrong with you. You're just responding to a certain stimulus. It's like a dog. If you've ever had a rescue dog, I know Terry likes the old rescue dogs. Sometimes those dogs, when you raise your hand to pet them, they will cower. And it's not because there's something wrong with the dog. It's because they have been programmed that usually that means they're going to get hit. Much like, kids who are abused. You have a stimulus that always comes in, and you can look at it as, hey, what's wrong with me or what's going on? But we can also talk about ways to deal with it and ways to overcome that. And that's what this talks about today. So, Terry, what are your intro thoughts on trauma and addiction?
Well, trauma can be devastating for somebody. It can affect you mentally and even physically. And I think, they say that like 2/3 of alcoholics have experienced some form of trauma in their life. And, I'd argue that maybe it's even more than that. A lot of people have experienced some severe trauma, and others like me, I haven't really experienced any severe trauma, but maybe some minor things going through life. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe I call them minor, but while a lot of my trauma was caused by my drinking, like getting in trouble with the law and getting in trouble with the marriage and things like that. And mm-hmm. I have some of those irrational fears as well. And maybe they are a little bit rational, but at the same time, they're not really. There's really no reason for them. Like maybe fear of what other people think of me. Are they going to badmouth me around the world, and I'm going to be shunned and all this and that? And that's never happened. I have no evidence that would prove that would happen. There's no reason for that to happen. It's kind of an irrational fear, but it's still there. And that can affect, it has affected me a lot, especially when I was drinking. Like when I was drinking, I was afraid I was going to be called out as an alcoholic, and I was afraid that people were going to make it public and this and that. And so I just isolated and drank more to hide from those feelings, and drank more because I was addicted. And so that was kind of that kind of drove me down that spiral into heavy drinking.
Absolutely.
Is there something wrong with my video?
Yeah, your video's frozen. I think it's okay. We'll try to get it fixed or something. But we got to look at it because, years ago, I had a severe crippling anxiety around going to churches. I remember my wife wanted to go to church, and so we went to church, and, we were friends with everyone there. And it was difficult for me to sit through church. And, you look at it and it's like, how's that difficult for you to sit through? What the hell's the matter with you? Well, what happened was years ago, I was yanked up on stage by some psychotic pastor guy who thought he was a prophet. And it was a traumatic experience. I mean, you get this guy who's like completely sweaty and nuts and yelling and screaming at you about what God's going to do in your life. And, as a little 11-year-old kid who's used to getting bullied at home and at school, that's pretty traumatic. And that was something that carried on for years. I mean, I still get pretty anxious when I go to church sometimes. Definitely depends on, what I have. Like if I have coffee or something, it's going to be worse. But I noticed that experience kind of like shut off in my mind. Like I didn't think about it, but it stored something in my body. Right, very important because it's storing this stuff. And there's a video on this channel here. Are we still? Yeah, we're still live, I think. Yeah, there's a video on this channel about the book called "The Body Keeps the Score," and let's see here. Answer. I think that's working. I don't know. It's called "The Body Keeps the Score," and it talks about how the body stores trauma and how we deal with trauma in our life and everything like that, right? So very important. We'll try to get Terry back on the line here in just a minute or so. Hopefully we can get him going there. All right, let's see if Terry's back.
Hello.
Terry's back. There we go. Okay. So I was just telling him
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I was just telling him about the Body Keeps the Score video where we talk about how your body stores trauma and how it can pop up in your life even when you think you haven't dealt with it, like even in sobriety, right? You go through life and you have your sobriety and you think everything's going good, but there's something in the back of your mind and maybe you've gotten good at ignoring it or maybe you don't dwell on it so much, but it's always there. It could be a feeling, it could be a thought process, it could be the urge to drink or the urge to run. I remember I had anxiety over my trauma so bad that I felt like running away. And I was like, okay, what are you going to run away from? What are you going to deal with? And so we look at this and we have to understand how we start to heal from this. And the first part of healing for me was looking at my life and understanding that the people in my life that caused trauma did not single me out personally. This is very important because when you look at it, like I was abused partially as a kid. I mean, it wasn't as bad as some people, but worse than some, it was just whatever it was what it was. And so we look at it and I have to look at the people who caused that in my life and say they didn't single it out. They didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to go find Marcus and I'm going to screw up this kid's life. They didn't do that. And if there was another kid in the way, it would have been the same thing. Like Mark, Frank, Bob, whatever, the same thing would have happened because the problem is with the person doing the abuse, the person causing the trauma. The problem is not with you. This is very important to realize because it's a first step to healing and accepting. Now, by accepting, it does not mean that the person's right. It does not mean forgive and forget, right? If you read the Bible, it doesn't really talk about like forgive someone. It's like, okay, if there's someone who abuses kids, we're not going to like have him in the church even though he's born again and whatever. We're not going to have him lead Sunday school, right? That's just bad, right? It's like if you got a pyromaniac, you're not going to give him matches and gas. You're not going to do that because that's not what you do. Now, they might be reformed and they might be changed and everything, but you're going to understand what's going on. And again, by forgiving, what you're doing is a process for yourself. You're accepting it. You're not making it okay. You're not making it, off the hook. You're simply doing this process for yourself. And it's very important to look at, because when we look at it, you could go into the hard part of, okay, well, why did this happen? Why would someone do that? Why would someone do that to a poor kid? Why would someone do that to someone? And you have to accept that there are just people like that in the world. There are just people who suck. And there are bad things that happen to good people. And there are bad things that happen to bad people. And there's good things that happen to bad people and good things that happen to good people. It's all part of life. And we have to learn to accept what is, and we have to learn to grieve the loss of whatever it was. For me, it might have been part of my upbringing. For you, it might be a relationship. Whatever it is, we have to grieve that loss and we have to deal with it. And one of the other things is exposing yourself to, not exposing yourself, I mean, going into the situation that causes you strife, right? So for me, it would be, in that example, going to a church that I know is safe repeatedly to show my brain and retrain, hey, you know what, we're going to be okay. Showing yourself what's going on. David says, was anyone bullied in school? Yes, I was. I was bullied quite a bit. I was, maybe 5 feet tall and maybe 75 pounds my freshman year. So it was prime for people to pick on. I mean, I was an easy target. And it was in the time and age where people didn't take bullying seriously. Like, I would go and I'd tell the teacher what was going on, or the principal, and I'd be the one getting in trouble. I remember once, at my last day in public school, I had just gotten, not my butt kicked, but I was sitting on the ground and some kid started kicking at my head, and it was traumatic. And I remember the gym teacher was like, hey, dude, you need to go to the principal. You're going to get expelled. And I'm like, what? I felt like on Beverly Hills Cop when he gets thrown out a window and he's like, what's the charge? He's like, disrupting the public. He's like, I got thrown out of a freaking window. What's the charge for getting thrown out of a car? Jaywalking? It was kind of like that, where it was like, hey, why am I getting in trouble here? And I remember I just walked off campus. I didn't go to the principal's office. That was my last day at that school. And I was really like, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And it was difficult. And those things carried on into adulthood. Those things still affect me today. I'm still on guard. I'm still anxious because I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. My mind automatically says, hey, the bullies are still here somewhere. People are still here. Watch out when someone raises their voice. Watch out when someone flails around too much, because something bad's going to happen. And that's what trauma does, is it makes you think something bad's going to happen, when in reality it's not. Like, I've had this anxiety for, how old am I? 20 years as an adult, 22 years as an adult. And in those 22 years, nothing has happened like happened back in high school and grade school and back in my family life. Nothing's happened like that. But I still carry this feeling with me, and we have to learn to accept and say, this is what it is. I hear you. You're there. Don't need to fight it. Don't need to drink over it. What I need to do is I need to start the healing process of understanding, hey, this is what's going on. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I had a similar trauma thing in 7th grade, and I did the same thing you did, Marcus. I left that school, switched schools for 8th grade, and it stayed with me for years. Just stressed out about what people thought, what people were going to say, things like that, what was going to happen, all that stuff that never materialized. And it affected me, but I was able to move on, and part of that moving on was the acceptance of the situation, and giving that acceptance allowed me to just simply move on, let it go. I didn't have to think about it constantly and stress over it and have it affect my life too much. And I think that's part of where my anxiety might come nowadays is what, about what people are thinking of me or saying about me or whatever. And but it's okay, because I haven't had any bad experiences, and for the most part, people think I'm okay. At least I think they do. But I've learned to not really worry about that so much. And, as far as alcohol is concerned in that situation, that's part of the reason why for drinking and being an alcoholic, I don't really hide the fact. I mean, I don't sit there and advertise it that I'm an alcoholic, but um, I don't hide it. I don't have any shame over what happened. It's an illness. It's okay. I am an alcoholic, and I'm able to move on from that. And I think I'm a much better person for going through what I have gone through, and that helps me a lot moving forward. And I know that I can help other people because of my experience and what I've gone through and how I've gotten sober and how I continue to maintain sobriety and live a fairly serene and happy life. So
Absolutely.
that helps me a lot.
I think also one of the things to realize is, sometimes we downplay things. I was talking to my wife about this last night, where I was like, some weird crap happened when I was a kid. Like, people would probably not be in regular society if, it was around back then where it was like a big thing. And, I looked at it as this is what life is. Like, I was like, this is just how life is. It's not bullying. It's not, it just is. This is what it is. And what happens, and there's a reason they call it bullying, there's a reason they call it child abuse, there's a reason they call it these things, and that's because it provides a lasting effect. Now, it provides an effect as you watch Terry talk about his stuff. It's like he knows the exact day. Like, he's like seventh grade. I'm sure he could just picture it and you're right back there, just like with me. It's something that's locked in our memory for our protection. Now, one of the other side effects of bullying and abuse and spouse abuse and all kinds of abuse, anything, is the fact that it makes you see the world in a different way. And this is important. It makes you put on glasses and have a filter where whatever's coming at you, you're viewing through that filter. So I know there's people who have been wronged all their life or people who have been belittled all their life. They look at the world as if everyone's trying to get something from them. Like, oh, you're trying to get this, or this is a competition, or this is this. Or people like me who were bullied at home and in school, we look at it as everyone's going to hurt you, right? And it's very difficult to let people in. It's very, very difficult to love people. It's very difficult to not be on guard. And so we look at that and it changes our view of the world. Like, I used to view the world when I drank as this terrible, terrible place where everyone was out to get me and everything was about me. And one of the things that helped change that, this is very important because if you're dealing with trauma, if you're dealing with abuse, if you're dealing with stuff in your past, you are looking at the world through the glasses of that abuse. It's not reality. Okay? It's not reality. Not everyone's like that. There's a couple of bullies in school, right? You could usually point them out, and you're like, there's the jerks there. You can usually point them out, but not the whole school. Now, see, what happened with me is I started to look at the whole school. There's 3,500 kids in my school at the time I left it. There's a lot of people. And maybe there was 12 bullies, maybe. And so I looked at the school as, this is bad. Everyone's a bully except for the couple of friends I have. And in life, it's the same way. And we have to look at it and we have to change our view of the world. This is when we start to get better. When we change our view of the world and understand there's some bad actors, there's some bad people. We see this going on with the police debate. Are all police bad? Of course not. Of course not. The police who came the day that I was drunk off my ass and threatening my life were great people. They took care of me. They made sure I was safe. They made sure I could get, normal pants because I don't leave the house in sweats. They were like, yes, you can go do this. We're going to monitor you, but we're going to let you be comfortable. So there are good people. Good people. And we look at this in our society. Some people are like, all cops are bad. And it's like, no, that's not true. Right? And there's bad acting, bad things that are done. There are some bad cops, I'm sure, that do bad things. We've seen that. And we have to look at it and say, my view of the world needs to change. And right now, this is extremely important. Because right now, we have something going on where we don't understand the ramifications. Like right now, they're coming out with reports and psychology reports of what's happening with social isolation and what's going on in the news and what's happening in society. This is a form of trauma. Might not be as bad as getting bullied or beat or spouse abuse or whatever, but it is a form. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. And so we have to view the world in a different light. We have to step outside and say, the world isn't what's on the news. The world isn't what's in my head. I'm looking at everything through a filter. And changing the filter and changing your perspective is when life starts to change. Because what happens is every moment you view the world through those glasses, you're letting the abuser, the bully, or the other person take more. They're taking more. They're allowing they're causing you to look at the world, which is a pretty good place. There's some good people out there. There's some good stuff out there. There's also some bad. But there's also some good. And they're allowing you to change the way that you see everything. Your relationship with your spouse, your kids, your family, alcohol, everything. And when we step up and say enough's enough, you don't own me anymore. I might still have lingering anxiety. I might get overly anxious when people raise their voice or raise their hand or whatever it is. That might be true. But I don't have to live in that anymore. I can sit and I can relax and I can say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And of course, it goes without saying, protect yourself from bad stuff if there's really a threat.
Of course.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
I just rescued a dog 3 weeks ago, and he obviously had some pretty severe trauma in his life. I mean, you can't see any physical injuries, but mentally, some serious injuries and things like he's afraid to go through doorways. So maybe he was thrown into a room and locked into the room. You lift your hand or you move quickly, he will just instantly run from you. I picked up a piece of paper. He freaked out. He has had trauma. He's been hit. He's been abused and things like that. And, they tell us just be around him. They don't tell us to force ourselves on him. We're supposed to just let him come to us. He's attached himself to my wife and is afraid of me, although he's gaining trust as time goes on, but very attached to my wife. So apparently maybe in his abuse days, the woman was the nice person and the man was the abuser, whatever. I don't know. But what they've basically told us is we need to change the dog's world. And eventually he's going to slowly come around. I go by and give him random treats, and I'm always nice to him. I've had dogs for 30 years, and I've never hit them. So, you don't correct them in a negative way. You divert. You do all these nice things. Well, the problem with so that's what's going to work eventually, and it takes a lot of time. The problem with us humans is we don't necessarily have that option of changing our world. I mean, we can get out of that abusive situation, and that's if it's a dangerous situation, that needs to happen. Excuse me.
At all costs, I would add. Get yourself some water.
Yes. Sorry about that.
But yeah, at all costs, get out of a bad situation.
Right, but what Marcus was saying was was changing our view of the world, and that's for me. Getting sober was the first step of changing that view of the world. Maybe I used the alcohol to kind of push down some of those feelings and that anxiety I was using, but eventually it was causing a lot more anxiety. And then then I was able to get sober and concentrate on changing my view of the world, and that came with stuff that we've already been talking about for sobriety, which is like gratitude. And just trying to do the next right thing, not trying to I'm not trying to take care of all of my problems at once, but just what's in front of me and dealing with things, you hear it all the time, one day at a time, just trying to move forward in the right direction, even if it's super slowly, or even if you have to take a day off and not move forward at all. And that was important for me, and that's what seems to help me a lot, was really concentrating on changing that view of the world, because the world's not changing for me. I'm just part of it, and that's something I have to always realize. So I can change things that I can change. I can't change the things I can't.
Absolutely. And I think also, Grim Reaper says, I also don't like when something happens negative, my mind automatically puts the filter back on. And it's very true, because for me, I would drink away the feelings, because if you look at the timeline of my alcoholism, a lot of the trauma was kind of like picked open again, very, very close to the time I started really heavy drinking again. And what I found was avoidant behavior, whether it's drinking or just avoiding or whatever it is, keeps you stuck. It never allows you to heal, because it's just reopening it over and over. And when you drink, you can't function with it, right? It's not therapy. It's not taking care of it. It's not a way of coping. It's a way of prolonging it and actually making it worse. And
Yes.
Unfortunately, what drinking also does is it warps your view of reality. I started to think when I was drinking that people had done things they didn't do, right? I was like, wait a minute, that didn't happen, although I thought it was real at the time. And there's actually been a study where years ago they would allow hypnotists to bring their findings into court. So they'd hypnotize someone, get all the facts, and then they bring it to court, and it would be admissible and treated as truth. Well, they found out later that actually therapists and hypnotists, by omission, commission, or accident, were able to plant memories in people's brains that didn't actually happen the way they happened. So it wasn't allowed in court anymore. And now the same thing happens with our lives, especially when we're drinking. I remember when my grandma was drinking, she was like a 60-year alcoholic. She would go on about how she was some Native American princess. And we're like, Grandma, we come from England heritage. I mean, it's not there, but and I don't think you're royalty and everything like that. And as outlandish as that is, there's certain things in our life that gets tainted. And I want you to also realize that when you go through any experience, you have a unique way of looking at that experience. You have a unique way of looking at it, and a unique way of spinning it, and a unique way of experiencing it. And when we look at it, we have to realize that the map is not the territory. What we see in our mind isn't always absolute gospel truth. Okay, so, we have to take that with a grain of salt and say the way I experienced it then may or may not be what the actual reality was. And this isn't to say, demean it or it didn't happen or whatever. This is just to say our memories and our views are completely subjective. And what
Yes.
might keep you stuck your entire life might be based on false pretense. Like I remember one time I got bullied, which I looked at as I was the complete and utter victim in that case. I was like, okay, I was completely the victim. But if I actually look at certain things, in this one example, the other examples, yeah, there was no fault of mine at all. But in this one example, I can look at it and say, yeah, there was something that I did that could have caused that person to get really angry. And I look at that. Does it make it right what he did? Absolutely not. But does it show me that maybe my worldview of I was just a bullied guy, I go through life and everything's against me, everyone wants something from me, poor me, poor me, poor me. It does show that that narrative that I've been carrying my entire life, whether consciously or subconsciously, is based on somewhat false pretense. And so when we look at this and we start to examine the stories that we carry, we all carry stories. I was bullied. I was this. You won't believe what happened to me here. I was drunk. I was the son of this. I was the daughter of this person. You won't believe how the government did this, or whatever it is. we carry these stories and we live by them and we let them be like our mantle and describe who we are as people. Well, I'm here to tell you, I was bullied, but I'm not a victim. I was hurt, but I'm not a sad little person. We have to look at this and we have to say, this happened, but this does not define me. Sure, I might have lingering effects of it. Just like if you got a guy who comes home from war, right? War is probably one of the worst traumas you could ever experience. I don't know what it's like. I hope I never know what it's like. I've seen some things happen that aren't even close, and, you know, I know how bad those were. And when they come home, and if you had a firework or maybe something goes off and bang in the garage, and that guy jumps, are you going to look at that and be like, what the hell's the matter with you? No. You're going to understand. You're going to be like, dude was in a war. If he hears a firecracker goes off, he's going to run. Like my mom. My mom was in the Alaska earthquake in 1960-something. Insane earthquake. Like 9.2, I think they recategorized it as a 9.2. Literally, 4-story buildings were rubble. She's like, I walked over our movie theater, which was 4 stories. I walked on it. And she was traumatized for her life first. If you ask her to recount the story, it was literally maybe a total of 60 seconds to 2 minutes of shaking. Maybe. I'm probably overstating. It's probably 45 seconds. If you ask her, she looks at it as slow motion. She was at a friend's house. She remembers the fish tank going like that. She remembers what it felt like. She remembered things falling off the wall. And she'll describe it to you like it went on for a day. It was 45 seconds. And that memory's locked in her brain. So now first you have to say, was it actually a day of shaking? No, it wasn't. That was her perception. 2, if you go, me and my brother used to do as kids do and mess with our parents sometimes, and we go and we'd shake the bed to wake her up. She'd fly up, she'd be fully dressed downstairs in seconds because she's like, I got to be prepared for an earthquake. And mind you, she was like 8 when the earthquake happened. 8 years old. It locked in her brain. And did we ever say, Mom's an idiot, you know, what the hell's it meant? No. We're like, hey, she had a traumatic incident, and therefore it's producing this anxiety. And so we have to understand it, and we have to look at what's going on. Very, very important.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes those, that readiness is okay. That helps calm the nerves, definitely. Mm-hmm. I was in a hotel, and the fire alarm went off. And there I am running around the room. First I feel the door, and I'm running around the room. Okay, I need to get my pants, you know. and from then on, I always make sure I know where my pants are. You know, yep. I'm at my ready. But you know, some trauma isn't necessarily so big. Like David talks about, what do you think of being so used to socializing using alcohol, and without it, you feel totally petrified in large groups? That's a form of trauma. I had that trauma too. I remember the high school kegers where it's like, oh, I got to get drunk because I am just, I can't handle standing around talking to people. I don't know what to say. That was traumatizing. I hated that. Mm-hmm. I hated it, and alcohol was like an answer. And then went into college, same thing. And, you know, a couple of times in college, a very couple times, I'd do the party sober, and I'd be like, fine. And I'd be on top of it because people are getting drunk, and then I become smarter than them. I'm wittier, you know, mm-hmm. Even though I thought I was smarter when I was drinking. But, you know, the way I got over that from when I got sober and was going out finally after a little while and being comfortable with it, going out and to social group gatherings where alcohol was there, is I just went and kept. It's really practice is what made me more comfortable in those situations. I'd remember the trauma, and there was never any real trauma. I was like, oh, I'm going to sound like an idiot. No, it never happened. It was fine. I always had good conversations. You learn the basic things to say, like, hey, how you doing? Or you meet somebody, oh, what do you do for a living? Things like that. You find out things in common, ask questions, listen to them, things like that. And that's how I got over that trauma, and that's how I've gotten over other traumas in life too. Is just understanding the situation, if I'm able to walk through it and go from there, and that seemed to help a lot.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to really address it and say, hey, look, this is the way it is. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm not going to try to run from it, and I'm going to get through it. And what Terry just described is basically exposure therapy. You expose yourself to the stimulus, and it drops your anxiety, and pretty soon it gets to be nothing. I remember when I went in rehab, it was 24-hour a day, 30-day anxious, all day, every day. And it was the same thing when I went to AA meetings. And then over time, it started to drop, and I started to get more comfortable. If I stop going and then I go again, the anxiety comes back. It's kind of like, Terry talks about with his dog. You have to slowly reintroduce him. And that's what I learned sobriety was for me, is it was a way to learn to live life again. I had to learn to completely live again because everything was all about drinking. And I didn't understand what was going on, and I would always say, what's wrong with me? And you see this happen with kids, if you've ever had kids or been around kids for any time. They always think something's wrong with them. They drop a cup, and it's like, what's wrong with me? Well, nothing. Everyone drops cups. Forget about it. When we're adults and we're like, why am I anxious all the time? What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. You've been programmed to be where you're at. Through your upbringing, through your view of the world, through the things that have happened to you, through the abuse, the trauma, whatever it is you went through, brought you where you're at. Now, you can look at that one of two ways. Before I got sober, I looked at that as, poor me. I'm a victim of life. All this shit happened to me. Poor little guy, what are we going to do? Now, completely valid to feel that way, but how's that working for you? And it didn't work for me. I was a bumbling mess. I drank every night to oblivion. I was killing my health, wasn't dealing with issues. And so when I got sober, I decided to say, well, I'm not a victim. There's other people who have gone through the same thing. I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who've ever dealt with this. I'm also not singled out. Like the universe didn't wake up one day and say, hey, Marcus is going to, we're going to give him some shit. We're going to make this guy do this stuff because Marcus. No, guy did shit because people do shit. Some people just suck. It's just the way it is. Whatever their bag is, their upbringing, whatever. Right? And some people never get out of that. Like people who have done stuff to me, they never got out of it. Some of them are still doing it. It's like, what the hell's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? And people in my family are like, oh, you should hang out with that person. No, I'm not going to hang out with that person. I choose not to. Why? Because I'm a victim and I'm hurt and whatever? No, because I just choose not to. I'm not going to go and do that, right?
Exactly.
If you get out of a bad relationship and people are like, oh, why don't you go see Tom? Why don't you go see Sally? No, I don't need to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on what I'm going to do. I'm going to focus on me being whole and me being healthy. And I'm going to look at these issues and I'm going to understand what's going on. And I'm going to understand that everything up until this point is programming. And even after this point, I understand sobriety through my lens of the world. That's it, my lens. That's why different things work for different people. Some people do AA, some people go to the mountains, some people sing Buddhist songs, some people get heavy into church, some people just get sober. And that's the end of it. And we have to look at it and say, everything you do is through your lens and through your programming. And once you accept that as the cosmic joke, like, hey, that's the thing. You are completely programmed by society, by your country, by events, everything. Once you understand that, you are able to get out of it. It's like a fish. You go to a fish, you try to describe water, he's going to look at you like you're nuts. What the hell is water? It's all around us and it's in it. You're nuts. He can't see it because he's in the water. Take him out of the water for a minute. He starts gasping for water. And now he suddenly realizes, oh shit, I've been in water my entire life. Now, I don't know if the fish is smart enough to understand that, but I can guarantee you are. and you've been in the water your entire life, and you've drank your life, and it's caused you to think and feel and deal with stuff, and you look at it and you say, well, I'm going to get better a different way because it's not the drinking that's causing this. Okay, keep swimming, fish. Keep swimming. Because until you realize, hey, it's the drinking that's causing a lot of my issues, sure, there might have been trauma. Sure, there might have been this issue. Sure, there might have been stress. But if you keep swimming in the tainted water, you're always going to get the same result. Same thing with trauma. If you keep trying, like, people try to get out of trauma with the same brain that was traumatized. It's not going, you need new thoughts. You need a new mindset. You have to get out of it. You can't do that. It's like you try to talk to people here in the United States about certain issues and they flip out on you because they've been programmed to think a certain way. We've got to think about the flag this way. We got to think about this way. We got to think about finances. It's all programming. It's what it is. And the same thing happens. You get traumatized. I got to think about life this way. I got to watch out for people this way. And you don't even see it coming. It could be a guy with a little different eye. Might remind you of an abuser. You don't think about it consciously. You just get anxious. You're like, what the hell's the matter with me? I'm anxious. Well, your mind is constantly scanning 1,000 miles an hour or 1,000 miles a minute looking for that stimulus. And all of a sudden you get this feeling and you say, what's wrong with me? I need a drink. Nothing's wrong with you. You're programmed to feel that way.
Programmed.
That's it. That's it. You get out of the water, you say, I've been programmed. It's exactly what it is. That's all it is. That's all there is to it. And if you understand that, then you can start to heal.
Yeah, in this, that brings me to think about the lockdown. And, we're 6 months. Today is 6 months since my state got locked down. And, in the beginning of it, such a change. Was it trauma? I don't know, maybe a little bit. It wasn't like I was thinking about a drink or anything like that, but all of a sudden, no job, have to stay inside my house, don't know what's going on, need to get masks, but there was no mask to be found at that time for a couple months, things like that. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now I'm just sitting at home with nothing to do. And it was just a matter of working through it. And that first step that Mark has already talked about, acceptance. Okay, this is what's going on. What do I have to do to move forward? And that's what I did. I just thought about, okay, well, what can I do to keep myself entertained? As far as the alcohol abuse goes, you've probably all seen reports how alcohol abuse and drug use has gone up by whatever, 40%, something like that. I don't know. I have no idea what the stats are, but all that use during this time all around the world has gone up, and the rehab centers are all full now, and there's a lot of people struggling, and I talk to a lot of sober alcoholics daily, and I haven't seen a lot of the ones that I saw 6 months ago every day. I don't know where they are. I don't know what's going on. People with 20, 30 years of sobriety, I haven't seen them. I don't know where they are. Occasionally, some of them I see on a Zoom meeting or something. And if you can tell right away if they haven't been out socializing or if they're sitting in their victim mentality or this is all happening to me and this and that. You can tell right away when they start talking. It's scary how it can just affect you so much. So I purposefully try to get out there. I purposefully try to contact people and talk to them, and maybe talk to closer friends and my wife about issues that are going on, and keep that dialogue going. And life is a lot different now than it was 6 months ago. Of course, it's probably different for everybody on this call, everybody in the world, but still able to move forward. And it helps a lot trying to purposefully get out there and talk to people and work on the sobriety and the acceptance and moving forward in a positive way. And that's how I'm going to get through this, is just continuing on with what I'm doing right now. Those first 2 months were a little stressful. I had that feeling of I want more. I want more. What is there more than just this sitting around doing nothing?
Hmm.
And there was. I just had to go find it.
It's interesting too because this is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. Like right now, you have people that are just going nuts, right? You got people, fighting in the street. You got people who are flipping out about masks and, oh, don't wear a mask. Oh, you got to wear a mask. Oh, you got to do this. Oh, you got to do that. And they bring so much meaning that is in their head about certain things, like, oh, wearing a mask means that you're controlled. No, it just means I'm wearing a mask, right? I mean, does wearing pants mean you're controlled too? I mean, that's what society accepts. You got to wear pants, you know? And so we got to look at this and we see all these people looking at things a different way. And what I would ask is, one, what can you do about it? And two, how's it working for you? Right? So you have all these people, conspiracy theorists and crazy people coming up with crazy ideas. And, there's some truth to some things. There's a lot of false to some things. But either way, it taints the way you look. And you have all these people doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, we're all living in the same world. Terry and I live in the same world as you. You live in the same world as crazy conspiracy people. You live in the same world as someone who thinks that wearing a mask is the sign of the devil. And it's like, okay, you're choosing to believe this narrative that you made up in your mind. You made up in your mind. I wear a mask because the sign outside the store says, wear a mask so that other people don't go, okay, cool, whatever. That's all good. But there's some people who cling to these stories. And first of all, what's it going to do? What's it going to do? What are you going to do about it? Right? If you think the government is trying to control you with a mask, what exactly are you doing about it? Right? Well, I don't wear a mask. Oh, you showed them. Woohoo, there you go. Right? And you have this narrative of like, what the hell's going on? You have this narrative, and it's changing the way that you live and work in the world. There's other people that have, there's going to be a Great Depression. There might be, there might not be. I don't know. I'm going to cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, if I live as if, it really doesn't do anything. So unless you're working 26 hours a day, stockpiling money in the back of your house, not really much you can do. Not really a lot you could do. So what we have to do is we have to accept, okay, this is the way things are. Understand, even if I'm hell-bent on something, this is something that changed my life and is responsible for keeping me sober. Because before I got sober, I was hell-bent. I read the Bible back and front. I knew what it said. I knew what I believed. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working. Is that because there's a flaw in the Bible? I have no idea. It's a flaw in my thinking. I know that. But I was right. And being right wasn't working in my life. And for a lot of you guys, being right in quotes, because right is subjective, it's completely subjective, wasn't working. And when I got sober, I realized that everything I was right about, everything I was willing to fight about politically, economically, spiritually, everything, all that being right led me to a suicide attempt and a mental hospital and alcoholism. But I was right. I sure showed them, didn't I? As I sit in the mental institute talking to a lady who's talking to grass. I'm right. So next time you think you're right, next time you get in an argument on social media about whatever, realize I could be wrong, they could be wrong, we could all be wrong, because I don't even realize I'm swimming in water as a fish.
Right.
And when we realize that, it is the most freeing thing, and I don't have to drink anymore because it doesn't matter. If Terry comes to me and says, Marcus, I think you're wrong, and I think you're stupid. Terry would never do that because he's a good guy. But I could look at that and say, maybe I am. Maybe I am wrong. Like, I got ideas about politics, and I'm passionate about them. Unfortunately, I don't have a choice to do anything about them this time around. But I got these ideas. And I could say I could be wrong. It's like a joke we talk about whenever I turn the TV on. And I'll listen. Like, I don't agree with the current political people, and I'll turn them on, and my wife will just start yelling at the TV. And I'm like, wait a minute. Let's hear what he has to say. Because I know I think that person is wrong and not right and everything. But I've evolved in a part of my life where I could say, maybe there's something he's got to say. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong. There's a chance. And when I got sober, there was a glimmering chance that everything I believed could be wrong. And that was freedom.
Yeah. I will still, we get those political things. If I put on that political show and I'm watching somebody that I don't agree with, I'm usually able to watch it without yelling at the TV, but I will start. I mean, like Marcus was saying earlier, I'm programmed. I'm programmed a certain way. I continue to be programmed through other news sources or through social media or friends that agree with the way I think, and the fact that I don't hang out so much with the friends that may not agree with the way I think. So I will have that tendency to go that direction sometimes, but I'm better than I was. And that's one of the things that helps me in sobriety is I don't have to be perfect. I just have to try. I have to try and be the better person each day.
And you can laugh at it now.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm going to watch the debates, and I really don't care. I'm like, I don't care who wins. I don't care who loses. I just don't care. But I'll get excited, and I'll yell. And then I could be like, there's Marcus yelling and thinking he knows everything again. And we look at it, there's actually a very good documentary on social media that's on Netflix right now. I think it's called The Social Something. If anyone knows about it, type it in the box so that people can see. And it talks about something, and in my other business, I'm an internet marketer, so I understand this stuff at a very, very deep level. And they talk about how Facebook and other companies, their goal is to keep you on Facebook. That's their only goal. Like, they want you to be glued to your phone 24 hours a day because that's how they make money. They want you glued to your screen 24 hours a day because that's how they make money. So the way they do that is by feeding you more of what you like or respond to. This is important. So your social media world, this is why you have extreme groups flipping out. It's called Social Dilemma. Thanks, Creative Works. This is why you have extreme groups flipping out, because they go on their feeds, they go in their stuff, and they're being fed more of what they like. They're being fed of more of what they agree with. And they're like, the world is this way. Everyone's wrong. See, here's more proof. Here's more proof. Here's more proof. And you don't realize all the proof is just there to keep you on the damn social media platform. They're not giving you an objective view. You don't have even people who say, go research. If you go research this and you go down the old rabbit hole, you're going to learn what I learned. No, you're going to research based on a biased premise. You started out flawed. You started out with a biased thing. It's the same with alcohol. You're trying to get sober with a biased, skewed brain. And the same thing happens with social media, and you're like, the world seems to be that. Look, every time I turn it on, there's this. Or you watch a certain news program. Drives my wife nuts because I'll watch all of them. I don't care. I'll put CNN on. I'll put Fox on. I'll put this on. And when I put Fox on, she just gets real mad. And I'm like, I'm not agreeing with these people. I'm just seeing what they got to say. I want to have a balanced thing. I don't really care. I don't trust any of them. But we look at it and we're like, okay, we got to understand this. David says, I smell libtards. According to your bias, you perceive me and Terry a certain way. That's a perfect example of it. And when we understand that, like I could say, oh, well, these people are whatever. No, these people just disagree with me and they see the world different than me. That's all it is. That's all it is. If you get mad at someone else, it is your problem, not theirs. With the exception of a few things, like I can be mad at Hitler, and yeah, That's his problem. Dude was, like, he hurt people. He's a bad guy. But in other things, if you get mad at someone who disagrees with you, that's your problem. Usually, pay attention, usually stemming from your own insecurities about having to be right. Imagine your whole life is based on your own insecurities of having. This is why, like, religions have to get more converts. Not because they actually think these people are going to hell or God. What? Not because of that. It's because if the entire world believes what you believe, you are now right. It's time to give up being right. Because even when you're right, you're probably wrong. I could be wrong. Terry could be wrong. You could be wrong. But I'm going to be sober. And that's where it comes down to.
Right. Hey, everybody, we're seeing your comments. We just have such a deep topic that we're haven't gotten to any of them yet.
We could get to a few if you want to go a little over. I don't know how your time is.
I'm okay going a little bit over.
Yeah, I have a little bit.
I want to answer a couple questions, David. You talked about alcohol-free beer. We have a YouTube video that you could check out. It's all about alcohol-free alcohol, and really, I mean, for me, I don't do it, but many people drink non-alcoholic with no problem, and many people probably shouldn't. So, but you can check it out.
And I would definitely, get some sobriety under your belt before you dabble in it. I do drink non-alcoholic beer. I try to stick to the zeros, like Budweiser has a 0 where there's 0 alcohol. Heineken has a 0 where there's 0. I didn't even think about dabbling in it till 5 years sober. And even at 5 years sober, I got people around me and I'm like, okay, I have to really focus on this.
And the other question was, have you thought about any guests on here? And we have several videos that we've done with guests on. So you can check those out too, and we'll probably have guests on again.
And also, while Terry's pulling up some other comments, I want to talk to you guys about our Talk Sober Recovery program we have for you. If you are looking to get and stay sober and you need help and you resonate with what we're saying, I would highly advise you go over to talksober.com, click the big yellow button. For $27 a month, we got all kinds of PDFs, videos, tools to help you get and stay sober. Lots of stuff. You could load it on your phone. You can print it out. There's worksheets. There's all kinds of things to help you get and stay sober. Again, Terry and I aren't doctors. This is just what we've found in our years of sobriety. Also, if you do want to have a call with Terry and me, just you, me, and Terry, you can click on Private Sobriety Call. And you could go here and get a call with us, talk about sobriety, and help out the channel. Really, really cool. There's also lots of resources over at TalkSober.com. You can download some letters, learn about rehabs, learn about all kinds of stuff, join our Facebook group, and everything. So, really, really cool stuff.
Right on.
TalkSober.com.
Jomar, you mentioned that you got a notification of our stream today, and when you were on your way to get a bottle, and hopefully we kept you from getting that bottle. That's awesome. Really glad you're here. Any of you that are still drinking or brand new into sobriety, it's awesome that you're here. And David's got 35 days. I didn't see all the I don't remember all the sobriety that people have posted in here so far, but congratulations to all you guys and gals with your sobriety. It's incredible. 1 day is awesome. 1 hour. It's awesome, except
deciding to get sober is awesome.
Yep. It's good to see you all here. And we really do appreciate your comments and watching. It's awesome.
All right. Can I make a book about your... I'm not sure what you're asking, but I do have a book coming out on sobriety. All right. Buzzworthy says, that's projection. You're not liking in others what you don't like in yourself. Yeah, absolutely. We project all the time. And I think once we realize that everything is through the lens that we currently have, everything we hear, everything we see, it's all filtered through the lens. And if you have an abused or trauma in your past, that lens is going to be skewed, and you need to learn to get it back on track and say, hey, what I view is subjective. It might not be exactly the way I think it is. The world might not be the way I think it is, right? We don't know. Like, we have to look at it and say, I really don't know. Really, I have no idea. Like, I see maybe 5-10 people a day, you know, when I go out and get lunch and stuff. I don't know what the whole world's like. There's 7.9 billion other people. I have no freaking idea. Oh, well, you know what? It's those liberals or those conservatives or those people or these people or, you know, these. No, it's not. You don't know what they're like. You have no idea. I don't know what they're like. I might have a disagreement, but I don't know what they're like. And again, they're viewing their world the way they see their world. That's all there is to it. And we got to look at it and change the way our narrative is from this is truth to I really don't know. Because here's the thing. There's a saying I have where when I used to be a preacher, I used to be a stand-up preacher. I'd preach the Bible to people who didn't want to hear the Bible, and sometimes it got kind of ugly. But I did that for years with some of the top evangelists in the country. And I thought I was right, and I viewed the world a certain way, and I thought I knew who God was. And you'd come and you'd talk to me and say, I think God's this way. And I'd say, no, you're wrong. This is the way he is. It says right here in this book, this is the way this is. And I knew, without a doubt, who God was exactly. But the problem is I knew so much about God that I became him. Because if I know everything about something, be it a God or a higher power, then I've now become him. Because I'm now telling him what he's like when I have no clue. I have no clue. I got a book. It might be wrong, might be right. It might have been written over years, might have been whatever. You got a book, you got this, you got your ideas. But the minute you label something is the minute you become the God in your own mind. And the minute I label Terry, and I say Terry is one of those teetotalers. That's what he is. The minute I label him is the minute I stop experiencing him. Think about that. You might disagree with a whole group of people. You can't even experience them because you've labeled them. Think about that. You can't even experience a tree because you labeled it a tree, and now they're boring. When you were a kid and you didn't know the word tree, you went up there and you felt the trunk and you felt the leaves, and you're like, this is magical. You telling me this thing just comes out of the grass and puts shade, and there's birds and squirrels, and it makes fruit? I put a seed in the ground and I get fruit. That's amazing. But the minute you said, that's just a freaking apple tree, what are you getting all excited about? It's just an apple tree. Marcus, you're nuts. It's just a freaking tree. I labeled it. Can't experience it.
Yeah.
And how many things in our life are we not experiencing because we're labeling it?
How many good people? Yeah.
Don says, I finally hit a year on June 14th. Congrats. I think I have a clap button around here somewhere. This one. Here we go. Well, the clap button doesn't work, so we'll clap some other way. But congrats on that. A year is great, and that's awesome. She says, I finally hit a year after 8 years just hanging out in the rooms of AA, watching people on their own recovery without actually working it. It's like up in the nosebleeds. Yeah. Yeah. And
Right
I'd rather
on.
have front row seats than the nosebleeds.
Tony says, when I get tired of AA, I come here. When I get tired of talk sober, I go to AA. Right on, Tony. I appreciate the honesty. That's great. That's what I've done too. Is I've just stayed open-minded and done whatever I can do for sobriety. And if something's not working right now, maybe it'll work in a little while, and I just go try something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. Right on.
Cool. And welcome, Don. I don't think we've seen you here before.
Yeah. Congratulations.
All right, cool. So any other pressing comments, questions, or chime-ins on the topics we've been covering today? I think it's just really important to look at our filters and what we're thinking. You know, like I remember I didn't get sober for like 2 years because I didn't want to label myself as an alcoholic.
Right.
I couldn't experience sobriety because of a label. oh, that
Yeah.
means I'm going to be this. That means, no, it doesn't. It just means I'm not going to drink. That's all it
And
means.
and what Jalmar just commented, right? Alcohol have always been my tool. It's embarrassing riding the shame train today. That was me, man. I was exactly that way, and I didn't want to get sober because of that. It's embarrassing, and I didn't want to ride that shame train. But when I finally got sober, it didn't happen. There was nothing to be embarrassed about. People were like, "Oh, good, you got sober. Awesome. What can I do to help you?" It was awesome.
Absolutely. I'm going to find our Facebook group link. Let's see, I can't see that far away. Actually,
Do
you
you
can get our
ever-
Facebook group link on talksober.com as well. I'll put it in the chat box, though, if you want to join our Facebook group, talk to other recovering alcoholics and people on a similar path.
Yep. Lots
Do
of
you ever
good
get-
conversations going on there if you haven't been there.
David says, do you ever get bored of your own being? I used to. I don't anymore because I've learned to just be okay where I'm at.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's about it for today. If you got anything else, hit us up in the Facebook group. And make sure, if you do want to support the channel and get tons of tools about sobriety, even if you've been sober a while, this has good resources. Go to talksober.com. Click the big yellow button. You can sign up here. You just fill out the form like this. It's less than the price of a cheap beer a day. That's a cheap beer. It's not even good, right? You put your name, last name, email address, fill all this out. It's completely secure. It'll give you a little username and password, and you can go in and start devouring the resources on how to get and stay sober. That's over at talksober.com. I'll give you guys the sign-up link in the chat box. That's what helps us keep going here on the old Talk Sober channel, so we can provide our crazy ramblings to you, and hopefully you guys can decipher what keeps you sober.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys, thanks for being here. Subscribe, click the bell, and we'll see you next week.